participating in the lawsuit, and there's a declaration for each parent describing their situation. If any, after the press conference, if you have any problems or you're not getting something, please feel free to email the communications folks at the ACLU of Iowa at editor@aclu-ia.org. Some of the national media folks, you probably have Aaron's email, and you can certainly contact them as well. So Cindy, you've put that in there. Well, let's start with ACLU of Iowa Legal Director, Rita Bettis Austin, and she will give us sort of an overview of the lawsuit and what all it entails.
Aha, okay. Can you hear me, Veronica? Okay, all right, thank you, Veronica. Today we filed a federal lawsuit on behalf of 11 families and the ARC of Iowa, a disability rights group, seeking to block a provision of HF 847, which prohibits schools from requiring anyone to wear a mask. These 11 families and members of the ARC of Iowa all across the state have children who are too young to be vaccinated and who have disabilities, including underlying health conditions, that make them particularly susceptible to severe illness and even death from COVID-19. This violates federal civil rights laws that are meant to protect kids with disabilities in education from discrimination. Getting HF 847 blocked is urgent for the state of Iowa because this law puts vulnerable kids in a dangerous situation. Schools need to be able to require everyone to wear a mask in order to meet their obligations to these children. It's wrong to force kids out of school because they have health conditions and disabilities that put them at a higher risk of serious complications from COVID. And it's wrong to require parents to expose their children to these risks just so they can go to school. We are asking the court to block HF 847 so that our schools in Iowa will be able to require masks when necessary to ensure an equal education for all kids. The ACLU was joined in filing this case by Disability Rights Iowa, the ARC of the United States, the Arnold and Porter Law Firm, and the Duff Law Firm, and we are so grateful to be partnering with them on this critically important case. And with that, I will hand things over to Susan to talk in a little bit more detail about the case. Or to Veronica.
Well, that's okay.
To introduce Susan.
I just want to make sure that people know that Susan Misner, the nice thing it is on her screen, and Susan is the director of the ACLU National's Disability Rights Program. So take it away, Susan, and you'll have to unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. Hi, good to be with you, and it's good to be partners with everyone on this case. This case, like the case we filed in South Carolina, is because children with disabilities have a right to equal access to their education. And with the state refusing to allow schools to require masks, it endangers everyone, but especially students with disabilities. So federal disability rights laws, the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Rehabilitation Act, do not allow state and local entities to exclude students with disabilities, to offer them lesser services or programs, or to fail to provide reasonable modifications in order to give them equal access to their education. So for some of our families, the lack of universal masking, as the CDC and most public health authorities recommend, has made the school environment so dangerous that their children have effectively been excluded. For other families, the alternative that these school districts have offered them, which is a remote learning option with pre-recorded lessons without any interaction, is really a lesser service than what they need, and that and that is particularly inappropriate for students with disabilities who tend to benefit much more from the hands-on interaction. And HR 847 has also prohibited schools from making what federal disability rights law requires, which is reasonable modifications in order for students with disabilities to have equal access to their education. And that's a fancy way of saying that if the student needs the school to do something that's reasonable, and following public health guidelines is pretty reasonable, then they must do that under the law. They must do that in order to allow the students with disabilities access to their education. So I'm happy to answer questions afterwards. I hope that's a quick rundown of the basic legal issues, and I'll hand it over to the next speaker. Thanks.
That's great, Susan. Thank you. So next up, we have Doug Cunningham with ARC of Iowa. And Doug, I know you have a statement, but could you also tell us a little bit about what ARC is?
Sure. The ARC of Iowa is a 60-year-old organization that advocates for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in Iowa. We're part of a national affiliate that covers the entire country. We have historically covered the entire state, and when we find issues like this that come up, we do what we can to try and make things right for students and people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We believe that this should not be a political issue. It's an issue that affects the health and wellness of the children with disabilities in our state. And I would like to think that all political groups would embrace these basic principles. This law is making it impossible for students to go to school. And I've seen firsthand how families have had to make awful choices, the health or safety of their child or their education. Being safe at school is a right, and getting an education is also a right. I'm hopeful this lawsuit will correct this terrible situation that our state government is creating for nearly any family in the state who has a school-age child with a condition threatened by COVID.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, so we'll have one final organizational person, and then we'll have two clients speak. But next we have Katherine Johnson. She is the Executive Director of Disability Rights Iowa.
Thank you, Veronica. Thank you all for your attention and time today. It's really an honor to be here with you. For over 40 years, the United States has had federal protections in place that protect students with disabilities from discrimination based on disability. The Rehabilitation Act and Americans with Disabilities Act guarantee students with disabilities numerous rights, one of which is equal access to public education alongside their general ed friends and peers. The intent behind both of these federal laws is to eradicate discrimination based on disability. The mask mandate is creating significant health, safety issues, as well as educational risks to our students with disabilities. It's also creating barriers to our students with disabilities in receiving equal access, both to their education, but to all other school activities that kids participate in. House File H4847 denies students with disabilities this equal access to education that's long been guaranteed to them. It's excluding them from school, providing unequal access to the full day of educational programming that they're entitled to. And it's discriminating against them based on their disability in violation of both the ADA and 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. This law must be blocked. This is the only avenue that we have to restore these long-standing civil rights that have been afforded to our students with disabilities for longer than any of them have been alive. Thank you.
Veronica, you're muted.
pro tip for communications people, to unmute yourself. Sorry, I was just getting ready to say, I'm going to pause the recording on my end for a minute before we get into the clients. I found that the bigger the file, the longer it takes for Zoom to save it and email it to me so that I can share it with other people. So I'm breaking it into little pieces. I am hopeful it doesn't mess up the recording for any TV folks. If it does, let me know before we get to the client statements. So I'm going to pause recording right now. And now I'm going to start recording once again. If anyone had any problems, please drop that in the chat. So, all right, so now we're going to have 2 of the 11 parents who are participating in the lawsuit make their statements. And just to let reporters know, there's no questions for the clients. If you do have any questions that you would like to ask them, Rita or Susan or Katherine could definitely answer that. So Charmaine, I think we're going to start with you.
Can you hear me? Okay, perfect. I am doing this to help create a safe environment, not only for my own child, but for all children, including those with disabilities and other conditions. You would think that the schools would make the safety of their students their top priority, but unfortunately, that is not happening because of this law. It's important that children have the opportunity to learn in person. I think most parents have seen that over the last year. But what are you supposed to do when you're in my position and are afraid that if you send your child to school so that they can keep up with their education, you're afraid that the worst might happen?
That is great. Thank you, Charmaine. Okay, we have one more parent, and that is Heather Preston. Charmaine is in Urbandale, Iowa. Heather is in Des Moines, Iowa. So, Heather.
You guys hear me?
Yep, now we can see you and we can hear you too. Great.
Good. I know that a parent can't protect their child from all things, but they have a responsibility to protect them from serious safety threats. And for my son, going to school where not everyone is wearing masks puts him at a huge risk. Meanwhile, because of his needs, he needs to be learning in person. It's terrifying for a parent to have to worry every day about the physical safety of their child and to have to choose between their child keeping up with their education and their child becoming seriously ill or perhaps even dying. That's a choice that no parent should have to make. I want my child and children to come home safely from school.
That was great, Heather. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, with all of that, we can open it up to any reporter questions. It's preferable, I think, if you can unmute yourself and ask it verbally. That'll be easier. But if you're very shy, which, come on, most reporters are not, you can also drop it in the chat. So, any questions? I am not getting any, but I don't know if that's because different people are muted or there's Stephen. Okay.
Yeah, hi, this is Stephen Miller with the Des Moines Register. I guess I would wonder, this may be for Rita or somebody else to speak to the legal side, how does this interact or compare with the Department of Education's investigation into the law?
Did you get that question, Rita?
I did, and I'm wondering if Susan wants to take a crack at that. If not, I can.
Sure. The investigation is congruent with this lawsuit and with lawsuits that have been filed around the country. This is a very clear disability discrimination situation, and so it's unusual for the Department of Education to act this quickly in opening an investigation, but I credit it to just how urgent this situation is for our students with disabilities.
This is Laura Bellin from Bleeding Heartland. Can anyone on the legal team clarify, are you coordinating with those who are representing Fran Parr, the Council Bluffs parent who's suing in state court to block this state law?
Hi, Laura. This is Rita. These are two independent cases, so you'd have to reach out to her team to talk about that case.
Yeah, this is Ryan Foley with the Associated Press. Can you just talk about what your next step is? And for instance, like how long might it take before you get this in front of a judge to get some kind of temporary or emergency hearing?
Hi, Ryan. We are moving as quickly as we can and plan to ask for a preliminary injunction, and we'll be asking that the court block this law as soon as possible. We know how urgent this is for so many families, including our clients in the state. And I will just say, when we file those papers, Veronica will update the press packet that she has, and so that should be populating as we go.
Right, right. Yeah, and that's in the, for any reporters who are joining late, Cindy, would you mind dropping into the chat again the press release and then also the press packet? And just a reminder to reporters that, again, are maybe coming in late, in that we basically have still photos of the clients, video of the clients, all the legal documents as they are filed and we have them, logos and still photos of each one of the speakers today, or almost all of them. So if you need any more or different, or there's something there you don't have, email me at editor@aclu-ia.org. So that said, any other questions?
This is Stephen again with the Register. I wonder, for the parents on the call, if you could talk about kind of what your thought process was like sort of leading up to the start of the school year, what some of your concerns were, and just kind of why you decided to move forward with joining this lawsuit.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was that a question to the parents?
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, we can't have the parents answering the questions, but I don't know if Rita or Susan can respond to that question in any way or not.
Well, what I can share is, I think, something that is well known because of the tremendous advocacy by parents all across the state, that this is urgent and this is something that parents have been looking for a solution for their kids, just with increasing desperation as the school year got closer. And so it's here, and unfortunately, this law is in effect, and it's interfering with the ability of their children to go to school or to have an equal educational opportunity. So I would also say, as to the specific families, that there are some descriptions of each plaintiff in the complaint itself, but also we'll be filing those declarations, and once that happens, those will populate in that press packet that Veronica's putting together.
And just to give some of the reporters a little bit of background, with the declarations, there'll be one for each parent family, right? And it describes their situation and why this is such a difficult situation for them. So for any reporters who want details on the situation, or Stephen, like for Heather and Charmaine who are on the call today, there'll be a lot of detail about their situation in there. Of course, it doesn't give you a direct quote, but it will at least give you a little more background.
This is Daniel Payne with Politico. I'm wondering, there's South Carolina this suit now. Are there more ACLU suits on the horizon, or could you see there being more ACLU suits on the horizon?
I can't answer that. I can tell you that I have gotten requests from all over the country, that even in states where there isn't a statewide ban on masking, there are parents who are desperate because their school isn't implementing universal masking.
Other questions?
Yes. Susan, this is Ryan Foley again with the AP. The governor said yesterday that any students that are concerned about feeling unsafe in classrooms can just sign up for the online option. can you explain, why that isn't sufficient to provide equal access and what the case law might say about that?
Sure. So the online option was something that all of the parents, or virtually all of the parents, tried already. It was a better online option than what is being offered now. And there isn't every school district that's offering it, just to be clear. But now what's being offered is a pre-recorded lesson. It's just watching a video. For students with disabilities who need the interaction, who need the correction, who need the feedback about what they're learning, that is not an equal education as being in the classroom, in person, having the teacher interact with you. So that is a lesser service, first of all. It's also segregating the students from their peers. So that's illegal also under the ADA and Rehab Act. You cannot say, well, for students with disabilities, we're just going to put you over here, and the rest of the students can be integrated with the rest of the community. So that is a violation in two different ways, and the case law is pretty clear about that.
Okay. Any other questions? We'll give it another couple minutes. Oh, there's another one.
Yeah, just a quick question, if you can hear me okay. Andrew from KCCI. As sort of a housekeeping on the two parents whom we heard from, are we able to at least get the grade level that their students are that would be helpful for our stories?
I don't know that offhand, but is that in the declaration, Rita? Do you know?
Yes, sorry, I was on mute. Yes, all that information is actually in the complaint, which you have available.
Okay. And Andrew, if you have any problems finding that information after the call, let me know and I can email it to you.
Okay, thanks. I'm reading the complaint now and I do not see the grade level.
Okay, I'll tell you what, Andrew, do you mind shooting me an email, and as soon as the press conference is over, I will find that for you and email it to you?
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, I just send it to editor@aclu-ia.org, and so that I have your email, and so I remember. I'll be doing a lot of cleanup after this. Okay, other questions? Make sure there aren't any in the chat as well. Okay, I'll give it just another minute or two, and then I think we can probably wrap it up. All right. Again, if anyone didn't get an opportunity to ask a question, email me after, and we'll do our best. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now. And so if anyone needs recordings of this, again, reach out, and we will do our best to accommodate you. Anyway, thank you very much. Thanks for your interest. This obviously is incredibly important, and we appreciate you helping us get the word out. So thanks so much, everybody.